Hello, welcome to HR Talks with HM Pinnacle Consulting. This is episode number 3, and it is, I think it's like the 8th of May already. Time is flying. I'm Heather Mackay, the founder of HM Pinnacle Consulting, and I am here with my rock star other half, Cara. And we are here today to talk about everything HR related, which means anything people oriented. And we were discussing earlier today what we should talk about today. And we try and keep
Mhm.
things upbeat and lighthearted and fun. And usually we can come up with something crazy to talk about because people are crazy in general. But today we are going to talk about something a little bit more serious, but more heartfelt. And it kind of hit both of us most recently, and that's kind of why it came up in topic for us. But we thought we'd talk a little bit about layoffs and how to handle those from an HR perspective. And I know, Cara, that this has hit your household recently. And
Yes,
I think Dorian had something to do with that recently. Is that correct?
he did. Yes. So in our home, we actually unfortunately had, or my husband had to, help with a layoff process. And it was something that really was hard for him. He is such a strong leader. He cares so much about people. He obviously has a great mind toward a strategic end and goals, but he knew the people. He knew how it would impact their life. And I think that's also something that maybe you and I have the luxury, but also the difficulty of knowing. We know who just applied for a new house and they have a verification of employment coming in. We
Right.
know that they have a child or a family member who needs these benefits. We know if they're the sole income earner.
Yep. If
And
they're a
so
single parent, if they're going through, a divorce or, oh
uh,
yeah, it
there
just,
is
yeah.
a huge human component to it. And I do think, depending on the size of an organization, it's easy to reduce it down to a number. And sometimes that is what we have to do in HR, and we have to balance that of creating a layoff matrix, which we can talk a little bit about later, but also still doing it with compassion and care. And whether you are listening and you're someone who is trying to make a decision for a layoff or have been affected by one, here's the other side of it. There is a painful side of it, and there's a lot of care that does go into it, even though it can feel very um, more like methodical and analytical. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
My heart goes out to your husband because I think sometimes we take for granted the fact that we have to make the hard decision and we always feel for the individual who's been laid off, but it's
Mhm.
not easy on the other side of the table either. And there's a right way and a wrong way to do it from the HR and the leadership side. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But from the employee's perspective, I want employees to understand that leaders have tough decisions to make, but the sooner we start making those decisions, the easier it is for us to walk through them with you as opposed to just split second decisions. And you're thought of as a person in it. It's not just a number. And the minute the minute you think we're not thinking of all of those components, there's
Mhm.
a huge gap between reality there because it hits us just as hard when we're having to make those decisions. It is not just a numbers game. It really
Yeah.
is humans being treated as best as possible in that process. And so I always like to say bring HR in the very, very beginning
Absolutely.
because not only do we have to do all the analytics and we'll talk about what that looks like, but we want to make sure that we are going through the process as as an individual holding your hand. Like,
Yeah.
let us walk through this. Let us help you figure out how we get the best for your benefits, how we make sure that
Mhm.
you know what resources are out there, how we make sure that we're doing this respectfully so that you feel like you can work through your last day, that you're not being talked about behind your back or people are whispering because you're getting let go and they're staying or the awkwardness at the water cooler or anything like that, right? You want to make
Mhm.
sure that it's handled in a way that people feel really good, both the people staying
Yes,
and the people leaving. And that's not always
absolutely.
easy to do.
It is not easy. And like, I'm actually really thankful that we are talking about this because our the first talk we did was just about an awkward termination and like how to handle it. And there are those where there's this, a generic one person involuntary or voluntary exit. That is a whole different beast from layoffs because the impact on morale on both ends is huge. And I think it's a huge opportunity for an organization to, we all see reviews on Glassdoor. You get a couple of bad ones if you do something like a layoff poorly, that can really impact your ability to recruit. And not only that, I think this is a really relevant topic right now. I mean, I do believe, given kind of the current economic state, there are a lot of layoffs that I've heard in multiple industries, organizations. And so, how do we do it well? And how can we do it with a level of compassion? And how can business leaders partner with HR? Because we can peel back the layers of here is everything that you can do, you being partnering with HR, and then we kind of help counsel on doing it. But there's a lot of logistical components that can actually make it a smooth process to the point where even during a COVID exit, there was an individual who was a part of a layoff, and they were an individual who was at risk of a very possible, could have done a suit against us, but they said this was the best possible layoff. Like, this has been like the kindest way that you did it. And they actually complimented and thanked the person laying him off. So with that, I think that's a cool way to kind of go into it. You can do it and even receive a thank you and have people on the other end be gracious about an exit if done well.
Yeah, I did during COVID. I ended up having to close a facility. In the point to where we actually did an entire WARN Act because it was a large enough closure during a WARN Act. I mean, during a COVID that, and when we did it, we ended up having every single one, 100% of the employees stayed till the very last
Oh,
day
wow.
and through the closure because of how we handled it. And that was a true testament to the leadership and the way that they walked through it, that the
Mm-hmm.
employees were willing to stay all the way through to make sure that the closure happened in a way that all of the individual residents who were living there, but also the leadership and the rest of the organization were taken care of in it. And that meant a lot. And I watched that happen and I progressed through that. And it was like a 6-month process.
Oh, wow.
And I progressed through it. And I looked back and I really reflected on why did it happen so positively and in such a way that the impact was something that the company was able to pull through. And it was absolutely because of the treatment of the employees who were leaving,
Mhm.
and even more importantly, the treatment of the employees who were staying. And that's
Yes,
the thing we
that's
forget. We get
huge.
so awkward and so caught up in how we're going to handle talking to the people who are leaving that sometimes we forget the people who are staying are now the ones who are, one, absorbing that extra work, right? Because when we laid off, the work didn't vanish, right? It's somewhere, right? So these people are having to pick up that extra work. Two, these are their friends that are leaving, their coworkers, the people they hang out with all the time. Three, they are going to feel awkward talking to these people because of
Yes.
depending upon how we treat them, right? And four, they're going to wonder how are they going to get treated, when they leave. So there's this weirdness back here that we sometimes forget. We think they're behind this curtain as we deal with this out here. And
Mm-hmm.
so talking and working with them at the same time and bringing them together, I think makes it so much better. And you retain the people and they feel more respected when they continue
Yes.
to stay as well. And I think that's so important.
Well, do you think as a good next step, because we think we've been able to talk through like the importance and significance, but do we want to actually, because you mentioned it, the warn component, kind of what are the risks if also not done well? Not even from like the fluffy emotional engagement standpoint, but from a compliance risk standpoint. Could you elaborate on the warn piece a little bit?
Oh my goodness. It's funny because that is probably something that I'm actually really good at
Oh.
because I have more than once had to have the conversation to say, here's why you need to do Warren and the frightful side of Warren. So unfortunately, with the Warren Act, if you are going to lay off a specific number of employees within your organization, a specific size of your organization, a percentage of your organization, and I won't give you numbers because every organization is different
Mm-hmm.
in the size. And so I don't want to quote something and then have you go, hey, wait a minute. But if you are going to lay off a specific number of individuals, you must, must follow the guidelines. And it does mean you have to give notice to those employees. And you have to give a specific amount of notice, which is between 30 to 60 days, sometimes 90, depending upon the organization you're in and the amount of people being laid off. But if you don't choose to give that notice, you have to pay them out for that period of time. You
Mm-hmm.
have to pay fines for every day you didn't give them notice to the federal government and the state
Mm-hmm.
government. You also have to pay back wages to those individuals. So there's a large amount of money that is having to be produced by this organization that usually is having to close. And
Yeah.
that's why they're having to get rid of all of these individuals, or they're having to downsize, or they're going through bankruptcy, or it's usually a financial reason that the
Mm-hmm.
organization is doing this. So now add on top of that financial obligation they already had, fines,
Yep.
extra pay, And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
wait a minute, now you're gonna might as well just close the doors completely because you can't afford all of that.
My gosh.
So it is really valuable and important to make sure that you go through that analysis if you are doing any kind of layoff, to make
Yes.
sure that you are not laying off that particular number of employees that would trigger a WARN Act. So you can do that in advance of your layoffs.
And that is exactly to your point. Get HR involved very early because
Yeah.
these notices have to go out within a certain amount of time. And not only that, but there's also COBRA. So thinking about continued coverage for folks of a certain age group. And that's important to understand. You need to actually understand the demographics of the folks being selected for a layoff because is it going to be there could be gender discrepancies, there could be age discrepancies, and so what we've done in the past, and this is where we can kind of get into the logistical components versus the human component, but it does sometimes come out to a number. So again, whether you're someone listening to this and you have been laid off or you're someone making a decision, sometimes it does just come down to that business decision component of factors of who had the highest tenure, we have X amount of people in the same type of role. We can only maybe keep one. What's been the performance over the past X years? And then there could be other factors that a business leader may want or someone with HR could counsel upon of what are those factors to put into a matrix so that should there be some sort of legal situation, you can say, I didn't fire Heather because she's wearing the color blue and I wanted her to wear the color purple or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You can say, here is how we did it. We had a fair playing board here, and then this is how the decision was made. And that's a protection for the company. And also I feel like helps a little bit with the decision making as well, because it does take the emotion a little bit out of it, which is necessary for the ones on the other one with morale making those decisions. So
Yeah. I'm a big believer that when you come to the point of having to do layoffs, first step is evaluate every other opportunity before you get to
yes.
number one. Every business should look at any other opportunities. Can you reduce hours? Can you furlough? Can
Mm-hmm.
you do job shares? Can you reduce benefits? Look at every other opportunity before you get to layoffs. That should be your last resort. And for many reasons. One, because of the costs that you have in unemployment, the costs that you
Yes.
have, in retention of your other employees, et cetera, right? So there's a lot of costs associated with it. But look at all your other costs first. And is there anything else you can reduce before you lay off? Second, when you do to come to the determination, no layoffs are my only option, then you take the emotions out of it first, right?
Yes.
Everyone takes the emotions out. You do your matrix. You
Mm-hmm.
determine how many people you need to remove, and then you put them into a actual spreadsheet and you do all of the number crunching first. No human beings are associated with it. It has
Yeah.
everything to do with the numbers and it has everything to do with all of your analytics, right? So just like you were saying, Kara, it has to do with age demographics, it has to do with race, it has to do with creed, color,
Yes.
national origin, it has to do with all of it, right?
All
So
those protected classes.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing to do with any type of emotion, right? And then after you've decided all of that, non-emotional, and
Mm-hmm.
you've made your decisions, then you bring your emotions and your heart back into it.
Yes.
How do we do this to respect people and get the best results for everybody on both sides of the fence, right? Then you bring your emotions into before you go forward. But take the emotions out for the first steps, right? How do we do this without laying anyone off? Are there any other financial ways of doing this? If not, then we do the number crunching with no people in mind. And then we bring the emotions back into it. And as long as you do it in that kind of an order, you're going to make sure that you're making wise decisions. They're business related decisions. Because if you bring your heart into this end, oh my goodness, it's so
Yes.
cool because you can come up with a justification at that
Yeah.
table for every single person that you want to keep. And it is literally impossible for HR to be able to sit there and listen to
Yeah.
these justifications and be able to make the decisions on who has to go.
I love that you say that because I do think that having the preparation and the numbers and kind of removing the emotions first creates an opportunity for a really compassionate, direct, and kind of you need to provide strength and order in the chaos. And so if you can come from a place of confidence of, hey, not a great situation, but here's the business decision. You have been impacted. You'll receive the information. Goodbye. Like the quicker and more direct and stronger you can provide versus like a, oh my gosh, I'm like so sorry. Then it all of a sudden creates a more emotional and possibly like inflammatory environment. And what I would also advise as well is in that kind of information gathering, gather even more information. For example, if you are a remote like company, what is their home address? Do you need to collect back their technology? What's their personal email address so you can follow up with their severance package information or their COBRA information or their W-2s? So make sure you have all of that kind of personal information. Be thinking a step ahead so that if that person is impacted, they don't have to be wondering, okay, well, like, how do I return my technology? And then you're trying to scramble, okay, where in the system do I find their information now that they've been terminated? So just collect all the information on the front end so that you can kind of move forward with clear direction, and less questions after the layoffs have been done.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm a big believer in creating layoff packets before you go
yes.
for layoffs.
Mm-hmm.
And my layoff packets are twofold. One, it's the internal and the external packet.
Yes.
Internal
Mm-hmm.
is everything that we need to make sure we have in place before we ever have the communication, right? So what are the FAQs? Do I have notes and coaching tips for the managers for how to
Yes.
answer the questions that both the employees staying and the employees going are going to ask, right? So that they're saying the same thing to everybody, right? Because you don't want
Mm-hmm.
one-off answers that just totally blow it all out of proportion because they get confused or they get rattled or they don't know how to answer the question. You want to provide them those things. Have we, like you said, have we gotten all of the emails, phone numbers, communication, so we know how to
Mm-hmm.
contact them so that we can send out their benefit packets, so we can collect their information or their networking support, computers, etc., right? But then the other part of it is, what are we going to provide them with, right? So
Yes.
is it a severance package? Do we have unemployment information we can provide them with? Can we provide them with job information? Do we have
Yep.
reference letters? I always like to ask in layoff situations, can I provide them with reference letters from their manager,
Oh,
from the
that's a good one.
company, and provide them multiple copies of that so they can use that in their job searches? Do we have any opportunity for other companies, which is something I usually try and do above and beyond if we're doing mass layoffs,
Mm-hmm.
is go to other companies in a similar field and let them know, hey,
Yeah.
we're about to have to do layoffs. Do you have any openings for individuals in our field? Because we have some amazing employees who are about to lose their job. And then I'll put
Love
together
that.
a packet of jobs that people in our field or similar fields have open. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll put that into the packet and I'll say, here are some similar jobs to what you guys are already doing that are out there that I know are already open and they're expecting calls from you guys.
I love that.
Well, anything we can do to help them get back on their feet, I always
Mm-hmm.
do. And I'll even them put together a packet on how to collect unemployment because a lot of people don't know
Yes.
how. And I like
Yes.
to give them step by step. And it's not always easy depending upon the state you're in on how to do it. And so I like to provide them as much documentation as possible. So when they walk out the door, they feel like they have the groundwork to become successful on whatever their next step is.
Yes. And I like that you have different levers that you can pull kind of to also kind of to be employee centric, like going above and beyond with the job opportunities and different industries or different partners that you might know within the area. So that would be huge. Also, if you can partner with some sort of and kind of think of it's like almost like job coaching where they can look at your resume, help you with interviews, because there might be folks who are very tenured, or maybe they're just scary to get back out there. They haven't refreshed it in a while. So partner with one of those. I've also seen an organization where they extended Cobra, that they opted to, hey, we're going to keep you on our benefits for X amount of months for certain qualifying employees. Maybe you've been there for a certain amount of time, or maybe you were of a certain age. I saw that type of situation happen. And there was a Cobra subsidy so that they could have benefits for a little bit longer. And this happened around COVID. So a very important time for folks to have access to benefits. So there are ways to get creative above just severance to show that, hey, I know this is not a great conversation to be having. However, we are doing as much as we possibly can to get you back on your feet. And we are here to support you in this time through these resources once you kind of start your new adventure. So I really like that component of providing additional resources to help them get back on their feet. It's not just the exit, it's also we can empower you for your next, chapter.
Yeah. At the last organization that I worked at, it was a startup company, but when we had to do layoffs and we had to do it a couple different times, it was awful. As we were downsizing or right sizing, but we actually offered them their computers.
And
We
that's a good
offered them
one.
at a discounted rate, like the rate that they were probably worth, because we didn't need them. we offered it to them because a lot of them didn't have their own home computers, right? And so they're going to need it if you're looking for jobs or working remotely.
Yes.
So on their last paycheck, when they were getting their severance, et cetera, they were able to purchase their computers for like, $400 or whatever, depending on the type of computer they had. Some more expensive, but they could buy their computer from us for a really cheap rate. So we were doing that kind of stuff as well. So anything we could do to help set them up for success, we were totally doing. Our placement agencies, like you were talking about, to help them write resumes.
Yeah.
So as an employer, just a takeaway is think outside the box, right?
Yes.
Think about how you potentially can offer services, solutions, extras in those layoffs.
Yeah.
They're not all costing you, like even those laptops, it didn't cost us anything because we didn't need them and they were paying for them, right? So anything you can do to help those employees, one, the employees staying, look at that and go, wow, this company really cares about people. I am going to continue to invest in this company and stay here. Or,
Yeah.
wow, I know that this place still cares about me. The people leaving are not going to go out and blast on LinkedIn or
Yep.
Glassdoor. This place sucks and they treat us
Yeah.
horrible on our
Yeah.
departure. And I would never work there, right? They're going to instead say something like, unfortunately, I'm on the market again. I just left blank company, but I wish them the best. I had such a great time working there, right? So it can totally change out. And we all know, right? One bad review is all
Yeah.
it takes for people not to want to work with you.
So much more viral than the positive, I feel
It
like.
absolutely is, right? So you want that kind of review because it
Yeah.
means so much. And it's important. It's so important to make employees feel good as much as you can. Like it's the human
Yeah.
nature.
Well, and that actually, that's to wrap it up. How about the folks staying? And I would love your thoughts here as well, because again, there's two camps. What's the communication to those that remain, that are continuing to be employed? Do you tell them who all was impacted? Like, when do you tell them? Or do you just kind of let them find out by, oh, I was supposed to have a meeting with this person and they didn't show up, or their email is no longer in the system? I usually see it done where there has been no communication thereafter, and then people are like, I've heard there were layoffs. I don't know if my meetings are impacted. Where does my work go? I've seen that done more often than not. But what do you think? Should it be communicated? Should it not? And if so, how should it be done?
So I was in the camp previously, a long time ago, of doing it just that way. Like, hey, this is personal and private. We're not going to share that kind of
Yeah.
information. It blew up in my face more times than not. Because what would happen is exactly that. People would wait, they'd send emails and they'd go nowhere, or they'd have meetings, or there was work that was they were in the middle of doing and it would just drop and projects would end up failing because of it, right?
Yeah.
And it was our fault in HR because we were just leaving people hanging without having any information. And it was awkward because people would go in and they'd sit in a desk next to somebody that was empty and they had no idea it was empty anymore. And it was not good for morale.
Yeah.
And it was not good for productivity, and operations didn't succeed in it. And
Yeah.
so I am not of that camp anymore. I do believe that to make things successful, you absolutely have to communicate out, and you do it in a way that doesn't leave it awkward, right? So you do say, hey, unfortunately, and you give the reason why the layoffs occurred. Unfortunately, here's why, right? Downturn in business, lost a client, project was completed, budgets weren't there, whatever it is. And you do it for two reasons. One, because you want to explain it, but two, you also don't want everyone else to be fearing their
Yeah.
job next on the line.
Because
Right.
they
And
will feel that.
yes,
Absolutely.
exactly. And that fear is they create way worse stories in their head if you don't give
Yes.
them facts, right? And so you don't want everyone else to run out of the building screaming because you just laid off people like it's going to come again. So you want to tell them what's going on and why so that they know their jobs are safe.
Yeah.
And then also to make sure that you're honoring the people who left. So, hey, it's really sad. And I get it. We are missing them too. And we're
Yeah.
missing the amazing work they did. And we're missing them as our friends and our colleagues. But unfortunately, these are the individuals who aren't with us anymore. And we left on great terms, reach out to them. If they gave us permission to give you their emails and their phone numbers. So if you're interested in contacting them, let us know, that kind of stuff, right?
I like that. That creates more of like a familial aspect. I've never seen that done. I think the
Yeah.
closest I've ever seen has been like, if you have a question about project management, here's the head of the PMO. Or if you have a question about, HR, you can direct your requests to this particular individual, but they never listed. It was almost like those that were now exited the organization, it was like, let's just not talk about it and let's focus on who's still here. But there is something to be said for it. Let's honor the work they did. And it's nothing personal. It was nothing that they did wrong. It was just
Exactly.
the way the chips fell. These people were impacted. And, you know, feel free to, here's ways that you can help them. Leave them a
Mhm.
recommendation on LinkedIn. Tell them how you work with them. That would actually be, I think, a really beautiful. I never thought of that.
Yeah. I never
Not
thought
a,
of that either. I like that too. That's a really good way to word it.
hey, you were the one that started that conversation.
Yeah, but I didn't think about the LinkedIn
That
recommendation. That's a really cool idea too. Like, yeah, but I always ask that when I'm exiting and handing off their information. I always say, is it okay if your fellow employees want to reach out to you if I provide
yeah,
them, information? What would you like me to tell them? Like your
yeah,
email, your phone number, whatever. And they'll say, no, I'm not ready for that, or I've got everybody's
yeah,
numbers I want, or they'll say, absolutely. Or
yeah.
I've had people say, hey, is it okay if I send down an email on my way out? And I'll say, send it to me and I will forward it on. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
let them ever send it out themselves, but they can always send it to me and I'll forward it because that way I can screen it before it goes out. But I have no
Okay.
problem doing that. Like if people go, hey, we're gonna have happy hour to celebrate everybody, and please come and join us at blah blah blah, right? I don't mind sending that out because you want people to still be engaged. They did nothing wrong, right? This
Yeah.
is determination. This is
Oh
a
man.
company's choice because of
Yeah.
whatever reasons.
Man, this is such like a huge topic. I feel like there's so many different components because there's the decision making component, the internal, like at the, yeah, the decision making, the internal prep component of what managers or directors will say to the team members, what HR will be saying. And then there's the, to your point, the external component, not just with the exiting employees, but those that are staying. So many components, which is why you know all. But that's also why like HR is here to like assist and help throughout this whole process because it is a lot to think about. It's very easy to forget a step that can actually have a really large impact on the experience that
Yeah.
one of the stakeholders has throughout the entire thing. And you did mention as well, thinking about other options. This might be another fun topic, and maybe it could be a part of, I'm trying to think of where, but AV offers as well, because those are
Oh,
something that I was not as familiar with, but have started seeing a little bit more of saying, hey, you can either take this role at this new salary or stay through this time, transition all of your work over successfully, and eligible for severance at this time. So another option that I'm not sure if you've seen them too much, but I've only seen it twice. But
I
another
haven't.
interesting lever.
Yeah, I haven't
Mm.
seen a lot of that either. Um, One, because I don't know that I'm a big advocate for it.
Mm, oh,
And
interesting.
why is because if you force someone into taking another role, you usually end up with an embittered employee. Because it
Interesting.
isn't a role that they wanted, it isn't a salary that they wanted. They chose it not because it makes them feel good, not because they feel valued, but because they're desperate to keep a job. And I
That
don't ever
is
want
true.
someone who feels desperate. You don't get the best
Yeah.
work from them. It may not be a role that they're actually successful at or really good at. They're doing it because they have to. I don't ever like doing that.
That is it is a good component to bring up as well because I will say for one of the instances it was like we kind of knew they would stay just for the consistent pay, be actively searching until the very end, and then we would have to, end up doing severance anyhow. So that is a risk because it could actually be a longer term,
Yeah.
maybe a financial boon. But I will also say if there is a concern of potential um, I don't know if employee retaliation is the right word, but allowing them to kind of make the decision to at least let them choose. That was kind of the instance and that I saw was this one might be a little bit of a risky one. So why don't we let them see if they would be prefer this option or take a severance package?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I could see it if it was like for that particular reason, like there was potential risk to offer them something else. Yeah, I could see that.
So many components we can talk about, so many things to make a
Are
layoff
I know. The only
successful.
other thing I would say, and this is one that even I would say to your husband, is managers and leaders always remember to give yourself grace because it is a
Yes.
very difficult thing to do, to lay people off because you do know you're impacting people's livelihoods and their
Yeah.
families. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot to that, and it weighs heavy on you as a leader, as it should,
Yeah.
because there's a lot to it. But give yourself grace and don't take it so personal because it's not you who is personally doing it. You are representing an organization who has to make those tough decisions. And
Yeah.
so just give yourself grace in it.
I love, yeah, absolutely. So much grace for yourself. And again, lean on HR partners
Yeah.
because we are also there to protect you. I've been in on it where the manager does their 2 to 5 minute spiel and then we allow them to exit so that when they're angry, when they're scared, when they're frustrated, it can be directed at me. And
Yeah,
it's not as personal when it's like when it's not the manager. Sometimes I think because of that personal relationship it can be a
I
good and a
agree.
bad thing. But let us shield you, let us help you, let us empower you with the tools so that it does remove some of that possible guilt that might come with doing a hard conversation.
Yeah.
So,
So I hope your husband is doing much better after it, and I hope the organization's doing better. And I hope those employees who ended up having to get let go find really amazing and great jobs.
I hope so too. The thing that was funny was his closing remark was at the end of the day, he's like, I did it, but I feel even worse because they were all so gracious about it. He was like, it would have been easier if they sometimes would have yelled at me or been angry, but they received it with a lot of grace. And that was, I think, a testament to him, but also a huge
Practice.
testament to them as well. So
Yeah.
hard things, but they're definitely in our thoughts and hoping they all land on their feet well. And I think they will. I think they'll be just fine.
Well, I am super glad we actually breached into this topic, even though it wasn't a funny topic in any way. It was actually a really good one. And I hope that it brought a lot of people maybe little snippets of things that they might take away and work on.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Cara. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Heather.
Bye.